Hello. Now that we've had a look at how to greet people, introduce ourselves, start some basic conversation in Italian, what I'd like us to start to do is develop our ability to express more complex ideas in talking about ourselves, talking about others, and being able to describe ourselves and others and things. So what we're starting off with today, during this lesson, is what's called pronomi personali. Now, pronomi personali are what we call in English personal pronouns. And personal pronouns are words that can replace the name of a person or object without changing the meaning of what you're saying. So, for example, instead of Marissa went to the pool, we could swap Marissa for the word she and say she went to the pool. Another example, instead of the television screen flickered on and off, we could turn that around and say it flickered on and off. So we're using the word it to replace the television screen. Now, in Italian, the personal pronouns are as follows, and I've given you the English translations here as well. We've got io, which means I. Tu, which is you, singular. Okay, in Italian there are two versions of you. Now, tu is the version that you would use if you're only talking to one person. So if I'm just talking to one person sitting in the front row, but not to the rest of the class, I would use tu to address them. Okay, we've got lui, means he. Lei means she. Noi is we. Now here we've got the second version of you. Voi means all of you, or you plural. So if I'm now talking to the whole class, not just this one person sitting in the front row, I would address you all as voi. Now you'll hear me define voi as either all of you or you plural. Okay, so you'll hear me use them both interchangeably. They mean the same thing. I'm always referring to voi. Okay, and then lastly we have loro, which means they. So what I'd like you to do is just take a moment, pause the video, and I want you to practice just reading through those Italian personal pronouns, and then I want you to try saying them aloud. If you've got someone with you, if you've got someone next to you, then practice saying them aloud with each other. Okay, pause the video now. Okay, now that you've had a run through of the personal pronouns, or the pronomi personali, I want to start using them in a context. Okay, so we always use them in relation to verbs. Okay, now there's two important Italian verbs I'd like us to look at today. Now, first thing we need to say is verbs are action or doing words. You probably know that already. You would have heard them referred to as action or doing words. Sometimes in your English lessons you will hear them referred to as process words. Okay. So process words, it's a process that somebody or something is going through or doing. In Italian, verbs can be what we call regular or irregular, meaning they either follow a regular pattern when we use them or they don't. Now, we'll be looking at regular verbs a little bit later on, either later on this term or early next term. What we're going to look at this term right now are two of the most common verbs in both English and Italian. Now these two most common verbs mean to be, which in Italian is essere, and to have, which in Italian is avere. Now in Italian these verbs, as I said, are irregular. They don't follow a common pattern, they follow their own rules, and therefore you just have to learn them and know them. We'll do lots of practice so that you can become really familiar with them. And because they're used so commonly, you will start to see them a lot more often in what we're reading and what we're writing, and even when you're doing a listening activity. Now, in Italian, all verbs, regular or irregular, have an infinitive and a conjugation. Now these are fancy terms for something that will seem a little less complicated as we explain it. The infinitive is basically the name of the verb. Now you will only find the verb in its infinitive form in the dictionary. So when I talk about the infinitive form, particularly for essere and avere, I'm talking about the form that means to something or other. So with essere, to be. With avere, to have. So when I'm talking about the infinitive, really what you want to be looking for, or what you should be understanding that as, is the form of the verb that means to something or other. So there hasn't been a person or a thing assigned to that action yet. It's a very general one. Okay. Now when we conjugate a verb, we break it down into its different parts. So instead of it just being to be or to have, we assign different people or different things to the action. Okay, so for example with essere, let's scroll down a little. Okay, so essere means to be. Now the different forms of essere I've got just underneath it for you. So this is when we break it down, when we conjugate it. These are the different forms that we break it down into, and you'll notice all of the personal pronouns are attached to a particular word. Okay, so io sono means I am. Tu sei, you are, when we're talking to a one person. Lui è, he is. Lei è, she is. Noi siamo, we are. Voi siete, all of you are. And loro sono, they are. Okay, now one important thing to note there, as you'll already have noticed, there's no particular pattern to the words, you just have to remember them. What you do need to note particularly is that you always write the accent over the word è when you want it to mean is. If you don't write that accent, it changes the meaning of the word. Okay, E with no accent in Italian means and. So you need to remember, è with an accent is. È with no accent is and. Okay, just pause the video for a moment, and I want you to read through the verb essere and all of its different forms, its conjugation, and then just practice saying it aloud to yourself. When you finish that, restart the video and we'll explain the verb avere. Okay, now again, the verb avere, like essere, is irregular. It doesn't follow a pattern. Okay, so we'll run through, and at the end, once the video is over, you can have another practice of avere the same way you did with essere. So we have io ho, I have. Very important that you know in Italian we don't pronounce the H. H is silent. So io ho. Tu hai, for you, singular have, so one person. Lui ha, for he has. Lei ha is she has. Noi abbiamo, we have. Voi avete, all of you have. And loro hanno, they have. Okay, so always remember we don't pronounce the H in Italian. So these are the two most common verbs in Italian. To make it a little bit trickier, they're also irregular. So as I said, you do need to do a lot of practice with them, be exposed to them quite a bit, and really make an effort to learn them. Okay, once you've learnt them, you'll be able to do so much with them. So you'll be able to really start to use them in your language, particularly when you're describing yourself and you're talking about others, or things that you enjoy doing, or things that you like. Okay? So, I think it's time for us to probably do a little bit of practice. Good luck!